Full time at Stamford Bridge, Chelsea 4, Gent 2. The second 4-2 victory at Stamford Bridge this week, or at least in the past 7 days. And a slightly strange start to our Conference League campaign. In the end, of course, relatively comfortable. With, of course, conceding 2 goals against weaker opposition and some lulls within the game that I think were capitalised on, that kind of leave you thinking that some of this B team impressed, but I'm not entirely sure they did enough structurally as a team to kind of think, well, there needs to be wholesale changes. I mean, that was always going to be, I think, quite difficult for a B team to prove, to be honest, given how well the A team is currently doing for Maresca in the Premier League. However, there were some bright performances, and I think my more broader view perspective on this is if Maresca can use the bulk of the players we saw tonight, maybe with a bit more rotation, but still, and be able to rest what he deems his first choice players on a regular basis, and this group can progress through this first phase of the Conference League very comfortably, then you can't really have many complaints, because that's going to save a lot of minutes and hopefully prevent a lot of the injuries that could be really catastrophic for Chelsea for some of the bigger players. So although when a few weeks ago that Conference League squad was announced and we didn't see Cole Palmer surprisingly named in the squad, I think when you see tonight and the level of opponent that Chelsea should be beating really across this competition, it kind of makes a bit more sense and shows that strength in depth that, of course, is clearly there. So the starting 11 was the identical starting 11 against Barrow, basically. And, it kind of does signal this is the B team. This is the team that Maresca very much views as the understudies, the reserves, the players who really have to prove themselves and will be used for these type of games. Of course, it's at home, so Chelsea always have that advantage. I'm interested to see whether this same 11 now plays against Panathinaikos in a couple of weeks' time. However, Jorgensen, Disasi at right back, Tosin, Badiashile, Veiga, Dewsbury-Hall, Cesare Casadei, a player who barely got any minutes in pre-season but now is playing a couple games for Chelsea, and then Mudryk on the left, Neto on the right, Felix just behind Christopher Nkunku. The game started really well. I thought Chelsea started with a really nice rhythm to their play. We were effectively playing with a back 3 in possession, so you had Disasi tucking in from right back, Tosin and Badiashile, and then you had, of course, Veiga moving up, and I thought Veiga, of course, scored the first goal. It was a really nice cross by Mykhailo Mudryk, who needed to, in my opinion, to have a positive performance tonight. And that was something that definitely is a tick in his box. Really nice cross and really good header. And you could see how much it meant to Veiga. And, Veiga is already kind of being earmarked by some of us as a bit of a cult hero. He loves a tackle. He shows a lot of energy and emotion and passion towards the Stamford Bridge crowd, even when he's getting short cameos, and he's being impactful, and he's proving to be the shrewd, low risk but really versatile player that I think a lot of us hoped when we signed him. Tonight I think you saw all of that. You saw the goal threat when he can be a wing back / left back bombing into the 6-yard box, but also moving into central midfield, adding that cover as we've seen already in his Chelsea career, kind of moving to a left centre back. I think the relationship between him and Mudryk was quite encouraging tonight, and especially going forward. So that was a real positive. And it kind of felt like with, Felix floating around, Dewsbury-Hall getting on the ball, Neto and Mudryk making runs out wide, Chelsea were going to, like against Barrow, rack it up basically. I understand it's a higher level of competition than a League 2 side, but still, I kind of felt like Chelsea then became a little bit complacent. They were a bit too poor on the ball. Not so poor in cheaply giving it away, but just a bit too passive for me. Far too many times I saw Badiashile, especially Badiashile, kind of get the ball and allow the ball to roll under his foot and then get it back under control and wait a few minutes and wait for Gent to press him. And that lack of intensity, I think, was probably frustrating for Maresca, right? Because he wants to see these players impress him. And all right, there is a bit of strategy to that. You want to bait the press. We all know that. But at the same time, against a team like Gent with the quality that Chelsea have, I just thought there were periods in the game where we really dipped. And not, it didn't cost us the game, but it's just, I think for those individual players who really want to make a statement and clearly want to get in the Premier League, I don't think those moments will be a good thing, not a massive tick in their box, and obviously allowed again a little bit of pressure in the first half, nothing too severe, and then literally from the second half, Zassi puts a really good ball behind the Gent defence, and then Pedro Neto gets in there, scores a brilliant goal, really ruthless finish, and perfect start to the second half, and you're like, okay, here we go again. And then pretty much after that, we concede really poorly. I thought all round the freedom of several Gent players inside the box. I thought Mudryk not being quick enough to cut out that cross after a set piece, just really, really poor and slack defending. It felt complacent, and that is something you don't want from these performances. And, of course, Gent celebrated it like they'd won the World Cup. But you always felt Chelsea would then have opportunities. We have enough quality there, but it's just, in those moments you're like, okay, how are Chelsea going to respond to this? And luckily they responded in the right way, got on the front foot, started playing more intense again. And Christopher Nkunku, who, to be honest, I think actually probably arguably had his poorest performance for Chelsea so far this season, still found himself on a score sheet because when that ball dropped inside the 6-yard box, there was absolutely no messing about. I think the goalkeeper should have saved it. I think the last 2 Chelsea goals, the keeper should have been doing better, but still absolutely ruthless finishing. And Nkunku gets another goal for himself this season. Kind of sums up how ruthless he is, even when he's not touching the ball that much and seeming to have an influence. When he does get that chance, he can bury it. And then, of course, Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, who I've criticised, or at least just been a little bit underwhelmed by. This was clearly his best performance so far for Chelsea, getting his first goal, which clearly meant the world to him. And, for him, obviously, I feel like these games, the Carabao Cup games, but especially these ones in the Conference League, are going to be where he's going to get the bulk of his football, at least for now. I mean, things can change very quickly, but he wasn't in the squad against Brighton, and to be honest, I think if he wasn't in the squad on Sunday, again, like with a lot of these players, right, because the squad's quite bulked, you kind of like, is that the end of the world? No, not really, but you kind of understand it. But then also these players, when they do get these opportunities, have to kind of prove themselves. I do wonder how that's going to play out over the course of the season, because I think right now, when the team's doing well in the Conference League and the Carabao Cup, but then the team in the Premier League is doing well, it's very hard for those fringe players to kind of argue about it. I think obviously if Chelsea's form dips or those players get a little bit agitated, that's something that Maresca's going to have to figure out. When it's going well, I think he won't have many problems, because that's just a natural state of things with a football club. But for now, I also look at Dewsbury-Hall and Casadei as a midfield partnership. If they're stable enough to get through the league phase or the group phase, whatever we want to call it now, the first phase of the Conference League, that's also great, because Romeo Lavia, Moises Caicedo, Enzo Fernandez, I've talked before about my concerns about our depth, especially at the highest level. And I just feel in that area, it's great that we could potentially rest, especially Caicedo, in these games. I think that's a real positive. So hopefully that continues. But it was frustrating again to concede late on. To be fair to Gent, they didn't stop. You see a lot of teams in these kind of environments give up, basically, and they never kind of gave up. There's clearly enough quality there. Gent are, not a European heavyweight, but they do have some European pedigree, so you're not dealing with someone who's never played at this level before. And the second goal was really, frustrating to concede. I mean, if you're Jorgensen, especially after what Sanchez went through against Brighton, this wasn't a great night because you conceded 2 goals. I don't think on either it's down to goalkeeping errors. It's just, he would have wanted to keep that clean sheet and for it to be a really dominant display. It was a nice goal, the second one, but again, kind of felt like Chelsea wanted the game to kind of be over, and Gent were like, no, we're still going, and they weren't really ready for that late onslaught. We saw Tyreek George come off the bench, Mark Guiu as well. All round, I think it kind of played out the way I expected. I thought Chelsea would win this game quite comfortably. I think the one thing is it's just good vibes right now, and I do think for Maresca, these Conference League games are really good because it allows him to freshen up the squad. It allows him to rotate. It allows him to give fringe players the opportunity. And at the moment, the mood and kind of the vibe around the Chelsea squad is clearly one of good competitiveness and players in the main. I know there were a few lulls tonight that were a little bit frustrating, but in the main, we still scored 4 goals. it feels like good competition. I think the main thing is who's going to make that step up. I think it was quite telling that Nkunku and Neto were the two players who were subbed off first. I think that kind of tells you that maybe those are the two that in Maresca's mind are closest to breaking into that first team. Is there someone that you feel like really stood out tonight? I mean, I think Veiga to me, just as kind of an all-round action man, someone who I think is going to offer Chelsea a lot this season, is kind of that. We talked a lot about that Swiss Army knife player that apparently Maresca is targeting. I think the perfect profile of that is Renato Veiga. And he, of course, is making the bench for Premier League games. He's being used at times in Premier League games later on and is doing it to great effect. So I thought for him it was a positive night. But we start off our Conference League in the best way. It's a long old journey to Wroclaw, but it starts with a win, and that's good to see. Let me know your thoughts. Follow me across the socials, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.